Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth with your host, the Green Bard. This is Dany's Dragon Bonds, Volume 1, Part 3. The Last Dragon Awakens the Last Dragon Egg. A Game of Thrones, Daenerys 9. Last time we left off with Dany being carried into a tent by Jorah, about to give birth. In this chapter we learn a lot of third-hand information about what happened to her after that point. We also learn in the first third of the chapter about what happens in her own mind and what we'll loosely call dreams. These dreams are part inner thoughts, part prophetic, part meddling by Quaithe, and part dragon dream. During the dream, the mantra, "You don't want to wake the dragon, do you?" is repeated in full or in part 9 times, just in case we hadn't noticed that this dream was about waking dragons. It is also about the Targaryen identity as dragons. Ser Jorah calling Rhaegar the last dragon comes up near the beginning and end, showing his death and foreshadowing Dany proving Jorah wrong, that Rhaegar is not the last. Viserys and his self-identification as a dragon has a paragraph as well. Around the middle of the dream, there is a scene that includes strange people that are likely her forebears. Initially, we assume them to be Valyrians, but I wonder about their multicolored eyes. Thus far in the story, we are only told about violet or lilac eyes with Valyrians, corresponding to the amethyst eyes from this vision. Although we do learn that there are blue-eyed Targaryens which might relate to the tourmaline-colored eyes in the vision. It also might relate to the Baratheons, or both. The opal and jade are almost certainly allusions to the gray eyes of the Starks and the green eyes of the Lannisters. I cover this more in my Kingsblood Series. Check it out. When The World of Ice and Fire was published, we appear to get a little bit more on these ancestors of Dany. They seem to be of the Great Empire of the Dawn, which details several different rulers associated with the eye colors seen here, plus a few more. One eye color suggested there is Onyx, from the Onyx Emperor. I previously suggested that Drogo might have the ability to skin change, that he is special, like Aegon the Conqueror. LML in his Between Two Weirwoods cast suggested that the Dothraki may trace their lineage to the Onyx Emperor. One might also suggest that the lineage of the Valyrians and of House Dany are tied to the Amethyst Empress, that the Starks are related to the Opal Emperor, and that the Lannisters might have blood ties to the Jade Emperor. Back to the scene. These ancestors encourage her to push forward, and then a dragon, we get no coloring, joins the dream. Dany becomes the dragon as her flesh tears. The vision that follows that scene is illustrative of the great power of a dragon.
Ghosts lined the hallway, dressed in the faded raiment of the kings. In their hands were swords of pale fire. They had hair silver and hair of gold and hair platinum white, and their eyes were opal and amethyst, tourmaline and jade. "Faster!" they cried. "Faster! Faster!" She raised her feet, melting the stone wherever they touched. "Faster!" the ghosts cried as one, and she screamed and threw herself forward. A great knife of pain ripped down her back, and she felt her skin tear open and smelled the stench of burning blood and saw the shadows of wings. And Daenerys Targaryen flew. Wake the dragon. The door loomed before her, the red door, so close, so close. The hall was a blur around her, the cold receding behind. And now the stone was gone, and she flew across the Dothraki Sea, higher and higher, the green rippling beneath, and all that lived and breathed fled in terror from the shadow of her wings. She could smell home. She could see it there, just beyond the door, green fields and great stone houses, and arms to keep her warm there. She threw open the door.
It almost seems that Dany is being enticed or tempted by this dragon power, bringing to mind the biblical temptation of Jesus by Satan. Given this, and that Lucifer means Lightbringer, I see a comparison here between her and Azor Ahai, and I also can't help but worry if this is indicative of malevolent or at least misguided influence from Quaithe in the dream. However, we also see evidence of a bond to the dragon. She could smell home is an indication of heightened senses, which is also what happens to Jon when Ghost and he become very closely bonded later in the story. In that bond, Jon is smelling with Ghost's senses. Could Dany be doing the same here? Her mind mingling with the dragon, probably Drogon, and she is sensing the world in the way a dragon would in this dream? There is also, of course, the more obvious evidence of a dragon bond, that she flew. After opening the door, she sees the second vision of Rhaegar, where he wears the dragon armor he dies in. She lifts the visor of his helm and sees her own face. Symbolically, this is her taking the helm of her legacy as a dragon.
And saw her brother Rhaegar, mounted on a stallion as black as his armor. Fire gleamed red through the narrow eye slit of his helm. The last dragon, Ser Jorah's voice whispered faintly. The last, the last. Dany lifted his polished black visor. The face within was her own.
You also gotta love the clear Star Wars reference. Yet it is a very Song of Ice and Fire twist on the trope, not a clear parallel to Luke. Further, mixed with the suggestion that she is taking up Rhaegar's cause is also the potential that she follows Rhaegar in failure and death. To close the dream sequence, we get the odd statement that follows.
After that, for a long time, there was only the pain, the fire within her, and the whispering of stars.
The pain she refers to is relatively straightforward. She's gone through a very tough physically and emotionally taxing ordeal, and on top of that, she gave birth. The fire within her has multiple meanings. It is clearly the ambition she had had before, but now stoked by this dream, an ambition to take her place as the last dragon and to hatch her dragons. It also represents the fire of dragons. I believe this metaphor to be an allusion to the bond she now shares with pre-hatched Drogon and the other two dragons. It represents the healing nature of that bond, which we talked about in her 3rd chapter, fire magic that is lending her strength throughout this ordeal. Perhaps it even suggests that Drogon's consciousness took part in the flight from earlier in the dream. Even if this is not the case, I have reason to believe that Drogon is witness to everything that happens in Dany's mind since his awakening in her first dragon dream. The last phrase, the whisperings of stars, means very little to us at first. However, when read against later volumes, especially The World of Ice and Fire, we see this as a likely allusion to the ancient Church of Starry Wisdom, of which Quaithe is a likely member. That church is also tied to the infamous Bloodstone Emperor, so its works must be regarded as questionable. The likely conclusion here is that some of this dream was meddled with by Quaithe or some other power associated with this church. It also seems that Dany learned something of ancient wisdom in this interaction with the stars after the dream ends, in a way that the author chooses to hide from the reader to preserve the mystery. In my opinion, she subliminally learns about how to hatch the dragons. She may think that they are her own ideas, but Quaithe or her church might have had a hand in planting them in her mind. Finally, given the identity of the Bloodstone Emperor as a blood mage and Quaithe's identity as a shadowbinder, there is certainly a dark magic component to all of this. After the dream, Dany wakes a few times with dragons consciously in her thoughts, tries to crawl to the eggs, asks for a dragon egg, and finds that Viserion's egg has been placed in her arms as she slept. This completes the incubation of the final egg of the trio. I do wonder if George R.R. Martin specifically had Mary Maz-Dur be the one that Dany told to bring the egg. I further wonder if Mary Maz-Dur had some magical way of knowing which egg still needed incubation. Recall that she studied under Marwyn, who is also associated with the Church of Starry Wisdom, meaning that she's also associated with the Church of Starry Wisdom.
Yes, the Magi asked. What is your wish, Khaleesi? Bring me egg. Dragon's egg. Please. Her lashes turned to lead, and she was too weary to hold them up. When she woke the 3rd time, a shaft of golden sunlight was pouring through the smoke hole of the tent, and her arms were wrapped around the dragon's egg. It was the pale one, its scales the color of buttercream, veined with whorls of gold and bronze, and Dany could feel the heat of it. Beneath her bed silks, a fine sheen of perspiration covered her bare skin. Dragon dew, she thought. Her fingers trailed lightly across the surface of the shawl, tracing the wisps of gold, and deep in the stone she felt something twist and stretch in response. It did not frighten her. All her fear was gone, burned away.
The egg seems to come to life at the moment she traces it with her fingers, as if to confirm that they are all 3 incubated at this point. She interacts with the other 2 not long after. Then Jorah confirms that he cannot feel the same heat that Dany feels emanating from them. Recall the fire within her from the dream. Jorah clearly does not have it.
Ser Jorah and Mary Maz-Dur entered a few moments later. and found Dany standing over the other dragon's eggs, the two still in their chest. It seemed to her that they felt as hot as the one she had slept with, which was passing strange. "Sir Jorah, come here," she said. She took his hand and placed it on the black egg with the scarlet swirls. "What do you feel?" "Shell, hard as rock," the knight was very. "Scales." "Heat?" "No, cold stone." He took his hand away. "Princess, are you well? Should you be up, weak as you are?"
Having accomplished this final incubation, armed with the hidden knowledge from the dream and having interacted with Mirri Maz Duur later in the chapter, she is now ready to enact a better plan for hatching the dragons than her prior attempt. Note also that Jorah expects her to be extremely weak at this point, bedridden. As we had said before, her dragon magic seems to have healing power. She is not weak anymore. She is strong and ready to face Mirri Maz Duur and the anguish it will bring. That'll be a wrap for this episode. Please join us for part 4 where we cover Dany's final chapter in this volume. Thanks to all the terrific artists who let me use their work on this YouTube video. Thanks to my wife, the brushed bombshell, who narrated Dany's chapters, and to my daughter, the sexy bass lass, who provided the terrific art of Dany's eggs. If you enjoy this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.